Hey everybody, welcome back. Another conversation for you right as a fly flies into my frame, literally as we click record. That's nice. My name is Eric Draitser. I hope you're seeing this on my Substack or my Patreon or YouTube or possibly even Counterpunch. Welcome. Try to have these conversations as regularly as I can. I'm very happy to welcome back Nat Wilson Turner. You should follow him on Substack for very incisive political commentary. It's Nat, where's your stuff been published? Naked Capitalism, a bunch of stuff in Naked Capitalism, right?
Yeah, it's all archived at Nat Wilson Turner, although for a month, Naked Capitalism has an exclusive on the full article, so there's previews there. I also post at ianwelsh.net, and I'm going to be writing more original stuff at Nat Wilson Turner. And also, my real name is Nate Wilcox, and I post at themmadraw.com, founded Bloody Elbow, and all that. So, but for my political stuff, I like to go by Nat Wilson Turner because people think that people who talk about cage fighting for a living are morons. So, also
Well,
gives me a chance to change hats.
I know that you have changed your hats and you are not a moron. And I wanted to talk to you today about, well, something you've been writing about for quite a while now. Specifically the various sort of the corporate chicanery and the corporate musical chairs and other things that are happening behind the scenes of the entertainment business, behind the scenes of the combat sports business. And obviously those two things have merged in recent years. Most recently, of course, we saw a UFC event at the White House. We've seen multi-billion-dollar deals announced seemingly every month. So talk to us a little bit first before we get into the most recent information about Oracle and what's happened to Oracle. Talk to us a little bit about why you think it's important to pay attention to all of these corporate antics and the business press and all of that to understanding what we're seeing in the entertainment and the cultural space.
Well, the most important thing is that Larry Ellison and his son David, and I can't say the name David Ellison without saying Nepo baby fail son. Did I lose you, Eric? Am I back? Did I lose you for a second?
I lost you. I don't know
Yeah,
why that
sorry.
happened. Start. Yeah, go ahead.
I know why that happened, but it's fixed. All right, so I'll start over. The reason that people should be paying attention to Oracle and paying attention to Paramount and paying attention to WBD and paying attention to American TikTok is because Larry Ellison, who is one of the biggest private donors to the IDF, or the IOF, as some people call them, the Israeli Defense Forces, is that Larry Ellison is taking his multi-billion-dollar Oracle fortune. Briefly, last September, he was either the first or second most wealthiest person on earth in the history of the earth. And he's buying his son, David Ellison, a media empire. And I can't say the name David Ellison without saying Nepo baby fail son. I just have to throw that cliche in there because this guy is the definition of that. He's not the worst instance. He's not Eric Trump Jr. or Eric Trump or Donald Trump Jr. or whatever, but here's a guy who's had a company, Skydance, backed by his billionaire daddy, and he's basically made a bunch of Tom Cruise movies and Top Gun sequels for 10 years and turned a profit. Bully for him. I could have done the same thing with daddy's money. That was a no-brainer to get on the franchise thing in Hollywood. But in the last 2 years, they've decided to assemble one of the most ambitious media empires ever attempted in American history. First, by buying Paramount from Shari Redstone, which is the old, Viacom cable empire that Sumner Redstone assembled over a 30-year period. And that includes gems like CBS News, as well as Paramount Studios, makers of The Godfather, one of the great American legacy studios, still one of the major players. They've got Paramount Plus, which is third, fourth, or fifth in the streaming wars on any given day. They've got Taylor Sheridan and Yellowstone and that whole metastasizing collection of whatever red state Yahoo nonsense. It also mildly entertaining. They've got South Park. So this is a major player just as is. Okay, Skydance was piddly ass bullshit. Like A24 is more important than Skydance. Paramount's a big deal. Even if it's not a first place contender anymore. I mean, CBS News is still something. And one of the first things they did Well, the first things they did were pay off Ari Emanuel by giving his clients at South Park a multiple $100 million contract in a deal that was described as being negotiated by either Trey Parker or Matt Stone and his representative at WME, aka William Morris Endeavor. They were in one room waiting for the call, and then the call comes from David Ellison, and Ari Emanuel's with David Ellison, and Ari Emanuel owns WME, right? So this guy is literally on both sides of the deal. I mean, I had a realtor once who tried to get me to sell my house using his son and buy a house using him. And wouldn't it be neat if my family was on both sides of the deal? And I like ran screaming out of his house. Somehow David Ellison's decision was to write a 9-figure check to the South Park guys. And then very shortly after, I think within a month after the Paramount deal is approved, they buy 7 years worth of rights to the UFC, which is also owned by Ari Emanuel through a vehicle called TKO that also owns the WWE for $7.7 billion over 7 years, which was a gross overpayment. People like the entertainment strategy guy have estimated that was like a double of what it was, a double what they were getting from ESPN, and probably 40 to 60% higher than what they would have got had their previous plan had been sell some events to Netflix, some events to ESPN, maybe some events to Paramount, et cetera, et cetera. Suddenly, Ari Emanuel helps David Ellison navigate this, and they get this whole shebang, this massive, I think, an overpayment. Then that's not enough for them. Meanwhile, Larry Ellison is part of a consortium that when the U.S. government, started by Biden but finished by Trump, and with the backing of the U.S. Congress, forces Chinese owners of TikTok to sell, Oracle becomes a plurality owner of the new American TikTok. And I don't know if you've watched any TikTok since that changeover, but you sure hear a lot less news about Gaza, and you see a whole lot more what look like ex-OnlyFans girls telling you why conservatives are smart and liberals are stupid and Israel's great. Like, have you, that's my experience on TikTok. I don't know about you. I know I can't find Boom Boom Tel Aviv on TikTok anymore when I feel like rocking some jams on a horrible, sad, bloody day. Not that I'm endorsing war in any way, shape, or form, but sometimes people get what's coming to them, and hey, shit happens. But now they're trying to buy WBD, Warner Brothers-Discovery. And the Discovery part is just bullshit. Like, the sad history of Warner Brothers is this is one of the great Hollywood legacy studios from the 1920s on, Casablanca, et cetera, et cetera. Also, one of the great record labels, like Warner Brothers, from Van Morrison through REM, Prince, under Mo Austin, one of the absolute great record labels ever since the late 1990s, when they got bought by AOL or Time Warner, and then they were bought by AOL, and then that fell apart, and then they were bought by AT&T, and then they were bought by this grifter Larry Zaslav, who had this cable roll-up called Discovery, jammed it all together. This guy literally erased entire movies. I don't want to get distracted by how bad he sucks, but he sucks that bad. Like, they made a movie that people were excited to see, some kind of Warner Brothers animated spinoff, and the creators were excited about it, the community was excited about it, and dude literally slides, oh, it's a tax write-off. I'm going to make it like this movie never happened. Not only will it not be released, it won't ever be seen because I'm going to make more money. And he had managed to, there was a streaming boom in stocks and entertainment in 2022 that ended in 2022. So companies like WBD, like Paramount, like Peacock, that are at this point clear also rans. But the story was, hey, Disney and company are going to come in. They're going to kick these pretenders, Netflix and Alphabet, which owns YouTube, out of the streaming business. Hollywood's going to be back in charge. And that worked about as well as the record labels chasing Apple and Spotify out of the music business. All right, it did not happen. And so there's this boom and then a big bust in 2022, and the stock prices. And so here along comes David Ellison with daddy's money, which after he announced this bullshit deal with OpenAI to build data centers in September 2025, suddenly Oracle's stock price shoots to the roof, and he's, briefly the second or first wealthiest man in the world on paper. And they decide they're going to buy WBD too. And like, if you look, and I'm not good with numbers, so I'm gonna have to look, but if you look at what they paid for Paramount, it was a piddly ass sum of money. I mean, it was a few, let me look. Okay, $8 billion they pay for Paramount. Okay. Now, a year later, they win a bidding war to pay $100+ million for WBD. Is WBD worth more than Paramount? Does WBD have Taylor Sheridan? No, WBD doesn't have Jack. All they have is David Zaslav, who sucks, suddenly getting this like a 8-figure severance paycheck for screwing up one of America's historic companies. And because they managed to bait, I don't know if Netflix did this as like a way to screw Paramount. Like, it seemed like Netflix was sincerely wanting to buy Paramount. And they had antitrust hearings, and they put a lot of money in, and they put a lot of due diligence, and they did a lot of work. So from what I can tell, Sarandos and company at Netflix were sincere about buying Paramount.
Oh, they were definitely serious. There's no
Yeah.
question about that. And
Yeah.
they definitely lost out.
They
Now,
definitely lost
whether they
out.
dodged a bullet or not is an open question, but they definitely lost a bidding war that they were very much authentically involved in.
I'll have to agree with you there, but my mind is always turning. Like, you get people like Elon Musk and Larry Ellison that seem like dumbasses that consistently make bazillions of dollars. I'm always thinking that they're playing angles I don't understand. So, but anyway, the outcome at the end of the day is that the Ellisons agree to pay $110 billion for Paramount when they probably could have had it for $10 billion if they had just done it quietly and bought, a minority stake and then expanded it and done the normal thing instead of engaged in this massive dick whacking contest that got everybody's attention. And so WBD also owns CNN. So you might not care about who makes the streaming shows that you watch on Netflix. I mean, although there's a serious argument to be made that those companies all work with the CIA, and the real propaganda is done with long form video and so on and so forth. But your daily news consumption, CBS and CNN, as much as many people, like probably both of us, are like not getting our news from those sources anymore, they're still top 5, 10 tier news outlets that millions of Americans get their news every day. I mean, CNN doesn't quite have the cult that Fox News has because, I mean, the original brand was we're a neutral, traditional news thing. And then Fox came along and said, hey, we're a right wing news thing in the 90s. And then MSNBC came along, and now MS Now, and said, hey, we're kind of on the left. And so CNN's tried different things. But if you want to know how important CNN is, like, forget Russiagate. If you want to blame somebody for Donald Trump, blame Zucker at CNN and blame Zuckerberg at Facebook, because CNN aired over 24 Trump rallies in full in 2016. And here's some background. Ari Emanuel was Trump's agent that got him the Apprentice deal. Okay, these guys go way back. Zucker was the showrunner on The Apprentice, right? And it's been documented that Trump told people that the whole reason he announced for president was to get a better deal at The Apprentice. Like, the plan apparently was, and I think it was a pretty good plan, to go down the escalator, say some racist stuff about Mexicans, and announce you're running for president, go back to NBC and say, hey, look, I'm second in the polls, or I'm third in the polls, or I'm beating like 8 guys who are in the Senate. Give me more money to be on The Apprentice. The problem was Zucker had moved. He'd moved to CNN. And Trump was suddenly much more valuable to Zucker as a product on CNN. I mean, the entire news media had this huge boom from 2016 to 2020 off the back of loving and hating Trump. And so CNN played this game of, oh, Trump's horrible. Let's watch another 40-minute rally. You know how many Bernie Sanders rallies they aired? Zero. And you know how many more people attended Bernie Sanders rallies than Trump rallies? Like, it's at least 2 to 5 times if my math's correct. Like, you
I
might have
think
better
that
numbers.
what we see is a pattern that emerges that I think is worth you drawing out a little further. You mentioned the example of South Park. Ari Emanuel represents the clients. Ari Emanuel represents Paramount, but and
Advises, not represents.
advises, but is in bed with the head of Paramount. Ari Emanuel plays both sides of those deal, while at the same time, from the cultural perspective, that is to say, from the side that we all are sort of reckoning with in the sphere of real world, South Park represents one of the primary cultural opposition forces against Donald Trump, one of the most searing critiques we see regularly of Trump, and hilariously so, of course, right? And Ari Emanuel's on both sides of this. Ari Emanuel is shepherding people into Trump's orbit, and Ari Emanuel is shepherding people who wouldn't share oxygen with Trump. Talk about what that means in the context of the monopoly that they're creating, because what I'm getting at is more than just a corporate monopoly. It's more than just owning a bunch of properties in various corners of the media, social media, legacy movie studios, etc. It's also about the culture. There is a monopolization going on even in our discourse and in our politics.
And it's been going on for a long time. And actually, you might argue that it's better now than it was, say, in the three network, two weekly news magazine 1960s, or the three cable channel, three networks, five news magazine 90s. On the other hand, you get things like Ari Emanuel, who, it's documented that he ushered David Ellison through the whole process of acquiring Paramount, that he and I believe George Clooney were the two people Shari Redstone called to check out David Ellison. She was like, I'm a Zionist, he's a Zionist, great. But I also have this legacy in Hollywood that I take seriously. Is he good Hollywood people? And they both vouched for David Ellison as good Hollywood people. He spent a decade in town. He's made his bones in the industry. Ari also helped get it past Trump, because even though the Ellisons backed Trump in 2016, and you'll frequently read articles about how bros don't get more bro than Larry Ellison and Donald Trump, the reality is at some point between 2016 and 2020, they had a falling out. Some people say it was about January 6th. I don't know. But the reality is that in 2020, Larry Ellison backed Democrats, and in 2024, he backed Scott, the North Carolina senator, I think Tim Scott, in the Republican primary. Now, Donald Trump may not be able to remember how many JDAM missiles we have at any given moment, or which aircraft carrier groups are in the Gulf or 1,000 miles away from the Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz. But he can remember when somebody backstabs him and when somebody changes teams. And Larry Ellison, David Ellison's dad, definitely changed teams. And so Larry was on the shit list, just like Mark Zuckerberg. And I want to finish. Zuckerberg planted people inside the Trump digital headquarters in 2016, and helped. What's the guy's name that owns that new Hasbara news agency that's paying all the influencers? Anyway, he helped Trump's digital campaign director run a state-of-the-art Facebook campaign in 2016. It's not the Cambridge Analytica conspiracy stuff. It's not the Russiagate utter bullshit. It's the reality of Facebook and CNN made a massive difference and got Trump elected. But back to the point, Ari Emanuel then helps, because he's been Trump's agent ever since he bought the UFC. Suddenly the UFC is political, and Dana White, who had been apolitical before and who is frankly not smart enough to be political, if you saw his speech at the RNC any of the three times, you know this. Hulk Hogan blew him off the stage. The soon-to-die Hulk Hogan gave a better political speech than Dana White did at any of those three events. Ari makes Dana White publicly endorse Donald Trump and associates the UFC as a right-wing brand. So from 2016 on, Donald Trump loves that. It's known that Ari Emanuel called Trump on behalf of Live Nation Ticketmaster, which Ari used to be on the board of, but was kicked off when they were in some antitrust trouble. When Trump was fixing their antitrust trouble, Ari Emanuel publicly was documented to be on the phone with him. Ari Emanuel also invited David Ellison to three different UFC events to sit cage side. And at two of those events, one after the election and one after the inauguration, Donald Trump was also there. And at one of those events, if you watch these UFC events carefully, like I spend more of my time watching the ringside and who you can see talking ringside, especially at like that first post Trump 2.0 UFC, because you had Trump, you had Elon Musk, you had Marco Rubio, you had Ted Cruz, you had Ari Emanuel, you had David Ellison. And at first, David Ellison and Ari Emanuel sitting way down at the end of the table, and Trump's at the other end of the table, glad handing with Cruz and blah, blah, blah. I think Jeff Bezos might have been there and Zuckerberg might have even been there. But anyway, by the end of the evening, Ellison and Trump, at first it's Ari between them, and then it's Ellison and Trump speaking. And at one of those two events, you can see Ellison and Trump, and it's not on the recast, but if you watch it live, you can see Trump and Ellison not yelling, but getting hands are being waved and things are being said. And Ari runs over there and puts his arm around both guys and smooths, puts oil on the waters and calms it down. I don't know what was said, but I do know that at the end of the day, Trump went from suing CBS and talking smack about how he was going to, these Ellisons better do what I say or I'm not going to let them buy CBS, which is owned by Paramount, to, letting them do it and then giving them exclusive interviews with Trump. Like Trump sat down for one of his few exclusive network interviews. He smacked the interview around the whole time, but nonetheless, there's evidence to believe that Ari Emanuel helped make that deal happen. And the thing about Ari Emanuel is he's not just a Trump insider. In fact, that's not even really on his resume. Just like he made $1 billion off of owning the UFC and WWE, but what he introduces himself as is the king of Hollywood, which his Hollywood empire didn't make him $1 billion. In fact, almost collapsed entirely in 2020 and had to go off the Endeavor, which is what he used to call William Morris. Now it's WME Group. Like this company changes its name every 5 years, which is not a good sign. Like it was William Morris Endeavor, then it was Endeavor, then it was now it's back to WME Group, whatever. It was a publicly traded stock. It did so shitty. They took it off the market, spun out two of its properties into TKO, which are suddenly worth more than the whole thing was, even though TKO still owns 60% of the company. But
Well,
if you
I'm sorry. I just wanted to try to keep
yeah,
us focused on something relevant for us today, which is, I guess, what you could call a short-term collapse in Oracle stock prices that we've seen over the
yes.
last number of weeks. This raises a number of questions, and we're recording here in the morning of July 30th, which happens to be a day when the stock seems to be rebounding after some news about a deal between Oracle and Google. So that I think may play into this discussion. But more broadly, over these number of weeks, we've seen Oracle stock collapsing. At the same time, we've seen a lot more details emerging about just exactly how that deal came together, how they were able to raise all of that money, which entities were involved, specifically the sovereign wealth funds of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, all three who are now engaged in various elements of a broader regional war. All three are potentially in the crosshairs of Iranian missiles and so
Well,
forth.
they've all been hit.
And they've
All
all
three
been
been hit.
they've all been hit, and now we see potentially an expansion of this war, especially if we consider Ukraine now attacking an Iranian ship. So in any event, there's a lot going on, but all of that is relevant to this Hollywood story because the deal doesn't happen without those countries, without these investments. And so now this raises a very interesting question. Have the Ellisons bitten off more than they can chew? And what happens if their money bags behind them, the Arab states that are behind them, what happens if these economies start going into free fall as this war expands?
Well, there's two big factors. There were two big primary financial backers to these acquisitions. First off, Larry Ellison, who was forced to irrevocably personally guarantee the WBD purchase for $45.7 billion of his own money. And this guy's not liquid. His money is almost all in Oracle stock. These guys make livings by borrowing money based on their equity, right? So as their stock price, which has lost, I don't know what the numbers are today after they've gone up 7%, but at one point last week, they had lost about 600 billion in market cap. since September 2025. Like
Not only that, downgraded to basically junk.
junk bonds. Yes, their bond rating went from fairly high. I think an A rating at the beginning of this down to the lowest, one step above junk. So much so, in fact, that Wisconsin is now wanting them to put down money before they'll allow them to proceed with the data center. They don't want to get Foxconned again. And so and then you had 24 billion from these sovereign wealth funds, which was initially denied. Variety reported this on a Friday and had to pull the story, but then when they did the filing, okay, it turns out, yeah, they did put up all this money, and they might have even put up more, and other sovereign wealth funds that are unnamed might have put in even more. So at one point there were US senators saying, oh my God, we can't have the Saudis owning a big chunk of CNN, et cetera, et cetera. And now suddenly nobody cares. But in the meantime, dumbass Trump and Bibi Netanyahu started this war with Iran, and they're clearly getting their asses kicked. Like, it's slowly but surely coming out that our military bases have been systematically bombed, our radar systems have been systematically bombed, our missile defense systems have been squandered, and we seem to have pulled out entirely of our Air Force base at Qatar. We've almost pulled out of the 5th Naval Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Our bases in Saudi Arabia have been bombed precision. Like, have you seen the picture of the AWAC that was on the ground in Saudi Arabia? And, you know, the AWACs are the planes with the giant, like, satellite dish on the top. They put the missile right on the satellite dish. So before, you've got this big plane with a satellite dish, and after, you've got two pieces of a plane and a big black hole where the satellite dish in the middle of the plane used to be. If that's not precision targeting, probably using the Chinese, what is it, Guaido system, alternate to GPS, I don't know what is. Anyway, so, and now in the last week, Saudi Arabia, for some reason, decided to bomb Yemen's only airport while Iran was flying the Yemeni delegation back from the Ayatollah's funeral. Saudi sent a delegation to the funeral. I mean, the ancient rules of honor that we followed for the most part for millennia would be, hey, diplomatic occasion, we went, you went, we're going to fly home safe, you're going to fly. Instead, they blow up the airport, and they had to reroute and everything. And the dirty little secret most U.S. media consumers are not aware of is Saudi Arabia and the UAE have been committing a genocidal war against Yemen since 2015. It cooled down after 2022 when the Yemenis finally hit some Aramco facilities, that's the Saudi oil company, with drones in 2022 and really got their attention. Well, since then, the blockade has still been officially on, but the Ansar Allah, aka the Houthis, have really upped their game. They've blockaded the Red Sea twice. They've beat back a coalition of the US and the UK twice to do that. For a while, they had a peace deal and they were letting traffic flow, but as soon as the Saudis blew this up again, the head of Ansar Allah went on the air and said, hey, Iran's been telling us to stay out of this. Hezbollah's been telling us to stay out of this. And the Saudis just gave us an engraved invitation. Cut to shot of literally millions of Yemenis in the streets celebrating this because they've been besieged and genocided for 10 years. Literally every person in Yemen has a relative that's died in this disaster. They are ready to throw down. And so the Saudis immediately send their proxies that occupy the other half of Yemen over the border to try to have a firefight, get smoked. The Yemenis, meanwhile, hit at least 2 Aramco facilities, one of which is the state-of-the-art facility in the world. Like, this is under a decade old. This is the absolute premier world oil refining facility on Earth. And we know from the satellite smoke that shit burned for days. And they might have had to cut it down. Like, we don't know what the smoke is from them shutting down so they can save the plant, and what smoke is maybe there's an out-of-control fire there and the whole thing is lost. Anyway, at the same time, another facility closer to Iraq got bombed. Yemen took credit for it, but for some reason the Saudis sent their jets that they spend so much money, their American jets, to go bomb Shiite militias in Iraq, who have also been waiting and dying to get into this fight. They could invade Kuwait and conquer that in about 15 minutes. They are the people who chased the US out of Iraq in 2000 or whatever. They're also the people who, along with the Iranians and the Russians, kicked ISIS's ass and has Lebanese Hezbollah. These guys are ready to throw down, and there's more of them than there are of Hezbollah in Lebanon. So the Saudis are FAFOing in a big way. And the UAE has already basically been taken out of the game. I mean, their shit got blown up. Andrew Tate fled Dubai. Do you know any influencers that are still streaming from Dubai? Because I sure don't. Like, all these economies
To
are.
be fair, I couldn't have named one before the conflict. I'll be
All right.
honest with you, but yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah, I think Mario Zafal, who does geopolitical stuff, is still streaming out of the UAE, but he's sort of in a different category. He's not Andrew Tate, alleged sex criminal or whatever. But there were a whole ton of these people that were like OnlyFans girls or whatever, or crypto bros that were streaming and living the good life, and they would get paid to talk about how great it was in Abu Dhabi. Keep me back on point.
I think the region is in flux because nobody knows how this is going to go. First of all, there's a madman in charge in the United States, and it's impossible to know one day to the next what his demented brain might think is appropriate or not appropriate. So there's that problem. There's the second problem that it's impossible to know to what degree events in the region would directly tie to David Ellison's empire. I mean, we know that they're investors. We know that they have some percentage of a minority stake, but what does that ultimately mean? Eventually, there could theoretically, if there were a change in government in the United States, a regulatory authority might not look so kindly at stuff like that. So those things could potentially change. What can't necessarily change is the structure of what the Ellisons have built here. And I just was reading an article the other day that I think I shared with you, Nate, about sort of the financial side of this and about the fact that they have basically built this empire on a fraudulent sort of feedback loop of investment where the investment is the output becomes the investment, where they're making deals and moving money back and forth between themselves and their partners in OpenAI or wherever. That there's something fraudulent about all of this. There's something Ponzi scheme like almost about all of this. Can you talk about sort of the house of cards kind of nature of what's been built here, irrespective of what's going on in the Gulf?
Yeah, this is a repeat on a bigger scale, according to many analysts. Mike Brock is the guy you were talking about. His piece is The House of Ellison on the Brink. Excellent piece. I quoted it at Naked Capitalism yesterday. It's circular financing. NVIDIA is the biggest culprit, where NVIDIA will invest in a company like, say, CoreWeave. And these are all examples. So this is all hypothetical. Don't hold me to any specifics because it's hard to keep up with the 3-card money game that's going on in detail. But NVIDIA will say, invest in somebody like CoreWeave or OpenAI or Anthropic. And then the deal will be that said either, CoreWeave rents GPUs out to AI model companies, and AI model companies then also buy their own GPUs. They will then use these to buy NVIDIA GPUs. So it's exactly the kind of scams that caused the dot-com bubble to end. Like companies like Broadcom, and I can't remember the name of the big one that was the big.
Well, not a comm company, but Enron is the prime
Well,
example, I
Enron
think,
was
of
one,
that
but
too.
there's one. There was another one that sold dark, broadband, and they were investing in all these companies that were installing broadband. And then when those companies went under, that company, oh God, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name, because they were one of the key .com stocks, and literally have not regained their market cap of 2000 since then. Like Amazon, it took years to get back to where they were before, but since then they blew way past it. The company in place I'm not thinking of. So my bad on not remembering that. But this is a repeat of the same scams that caused the end of the .com. Enron was in kind of various different things. They did some of that, but Enron was a whole different thing. But the circular financing is a real problem. And Oracle is a relatively small player in this, but they got themselves, the thing that boosted their stock was announcing this Stargate deal with OpenAI. And they're on the hook for $40 billion that OpenAI has to pay them for this stuff to pay off, and they have to get it built, which follow Ed Zitron in particular. Where's your Ed app for this stuff? I mean, he's definitely a a bear and a hater. But if you want to balance the entire rest of the financial media, Ed Zitron can go a long way to doing that.
By the way, I think you were thinking of Lucent.
Lucent, exactly. Lucent was sold in the late 90s as this is a can't miss. This is the Levi Strauss of the gold rush. They're selling pickaxes to the gold miners. You cannot go wrong. This is infrastructure. This is the bones of the future. And it was a terrible, terrible investment as it ended and precipitated, I think, the direct precipitator of the dot-com crash. So thanks for looking that up. But not only does Oracle have to get these data centers built, which is a lot harder than people make it out to be. These are enormously capital intensive, electricity intensive, and GPU intensive facilities. According to Zitron and other people, most of the GPUs that NVIDIA has sold, or a good percentage of the GPUs NVIDIA have sold in the last 18 months, are sitting in warehouses. People like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg have admitted much of our GPU capacity is sitting in warehouses. And that's why part of SpaceX's good news was, hey, we just sold a whole bunch or rented a whole bunch of GPU space, and Meta just did the same thing, which basically meant they're conceding they're out of the AI model race, right? So now it's between OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, Gemini, and Google just invested or partnered with Oracle. But OpenAI is getting their ass flat kicked in this. And, Disney killed $1 billion deal with them over their scam video generation thing, Sora, that came and went. It was fun while it lasted because you could literally make videos of Sam Altman doing any degrading thing you wanted to make because he was like the only public figure who had licensed his appearance. I mean, this was a fiasco that had people making videos of Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali making racist Sambo style videos. This was a disaster. This was Grok is the deep fake porn paradise, but for a while Sora just blew past him, and the whole thing ended in a puff of smoke in less than 9 months. And Disney was going to give him $1 billion, then they're not. And so Oracle's in this position where they're counting on this $40 billion from OpenAI, and I don't think Ed Zitron definitely doesn't think OpenAI is ever going to have that. Their revenue has not met projections, not even close. Their claim was they were going to do advertising on it. That is not working at all. ChatGPT is they spend $1.22 for every dollar they make. You don't make that up in volume. And so Oracle is hitched to some real losers here.
And I think that it gets to a deeper question about what really is all of this. In other words, what is the central question that I think ties all of this together? And I think that question is a question of AI. It's a question of what is AI in the future? What does it look like? And it seems like that question is being answered, but it's not being answered by any of these companies. It's being answered by the Chinese, who are producing these AIs of equivalent power, sometimes better versions of the Western counterparts, and they're doing it for a fraction of the price. There's no question that the world notices these things, and there's no question that the multi-trillion-dollar gamble that's being made here in the West is open for debate, whether or not that really is the future. And so that, I think, is the central question of all of this. What is the future of AI? And is the future of AI really what they're selling?
I don't think so. And if you look at the South Korean stock market, you can see a lot of people are already losing confidence in this. But the other thing, there's one other thing I got to bring up here, and I'm embarrassed I haven't brought it up before because I got on the New York Times for not mentioning this in the context of Paramount, is Israel. As far as I can figure out, the real motivation of the Ellisons in this is Hasbara, which is not a slander or a slur. That's what the Israelis call their efforts to promote Israeli interests publicly. Ellison has been a long-time avid Zionist, massive financial contributor. There's Oracle facilities in Israel. The first thing they do with CBS News is pay $150 million to Barry Weiss to buy the Free Press. which is an effing blog that might be worth generously $2 million, $10 million. They pay
Well,
$150 million.
they bought Barry Weiss,
Yeah,
though.
they bought
I
Barry
mean, that's
Weiss
the whole point.
and make her the head of CBS News. This is a woman who's never run a newsroom, not a blog newsroom, not a print newsroom. She's written opinion pieces for the Times and run an opinion paper, a blog. She's never done video production. She's never run a video magazine. She's never run a news bureau, all of which are monumental challenges that people spend their entire careers learning how to do. Like the people who are running 60 Minutes, which was one of CBS's biggest cash cows. If you're looking at this as a money play, like remember Steve Martin and The Jerk? Oh, this is a money deal? Like if you're running this as a money deal, you don't wreck 60 Minutes first thing. You don't chase Stephen Colbert off your network second thing. Like 60 Minutes was a cash cow. And this is a sign of the desperation of the whole propaganda regime. 60 Minutes was perfect vehicle for American empire propaganda because they would advocate for invading Iraq. They would advocate for overthrowing Libya. They would do all the horror stories about how bad Gaddafi is or how bad Saddam Hussein is, how bad Assad in Syria is. But then every once in a while, they would do a story, oopsies, we got caught torturing some people at Abu Ghraib, or naughty, that bombing of Libya didn't turn out to be so good. So it kept their credibility.
They had legitimacy. 60 Minutes had legitimacy. 60 Minutes
Yeah.
was the inheritor of Walter Cronkite's legitimacy. They carried this sort of historic weight of the and legitimacy of CBS News as a brand. And so by trashing that first, I think it's kind of like the bully walking in and pissing on the rug kind of thing in the Big Lebowski. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like
exactly. Except the fatal mistake was doing it while you're publicly aligned with Trump. Like on a certain level, like Sharon Waxman had an op-ed in the New York Times about how bad the Paramount WBD merger was, and she doesn't mention the word Israel once. She frames it as, oh, these people are too close to Trump, and that's bad and that's dangerous. Well, as bad and dangerous as Trump is, he's going to be gone, either by death or by being removed from office or a soft military coup, and Israel is still going to be around. So maybe it sort of served their agenda to have Trump out front as the political reason d'etre for this Paramount WBD stuff, for the Ellison media empire. But at the same time, most of the media backs Israel. But once you're aligned with Trump, that means the New York Times is against you. That means the Washington Post maybe is against you. Bezos keeps changing sides there. But most of the media, there's a big chunk of the legacy media that still hates Trump and will attack you. And even though they support Israel, somebody like Ezra Klein or Matt Iglesias will be critical of these Trump aligned or perceived to be Trump aligned mergers. So, that's one toke over the line, sweet Jesus, as the song used to say. And then when you add this to this being all in on AI and not even on the Anthropic side of it, right? Like they're literally on the side of Scam Altman, the guy Elon Musk calls Scam Altman, Sam Altman, who just the other day said the singularity has come, right? Like I don't know if you're familiar with Miller in 1843, who declared that Jesus was coming on a specific date and got hundreds of thousands of Americans together in the Appalachians to await his coming, and was popular enough to survive that not happening. Called a second date and got a reduced follow-up crowd, but ultimately results in the spinning off of the Latter-day Saints, Christian Scientists, the Jehovah's Witnesses, almost every native-born American religious movement. Sam Altman is the same kind of crazy. He's a cross between Sam Bankman-Fried and Joseph Smith, right? Like, and not to disrespect the LDS, but like this guy is selling snake oil of the highest degree with this singularity, which is sort of a fake Silicon Valley religion that computers are going to instantly become smarter than us, and we're all going to, and that means we've invented God. This is
it
crazy
raises
nonsense.
another question, though, which is the fact that can any of this exist with if the infrastructure doesn't really get built?
No.
Right. And we have seen in a relatively short amount of time, I would say in the last 18 months or so, the construction of data centers has become a primary political battle issue. I mean, it really is, and frankly, you can't win an election without coming out in opposition to a data center in some form or fashion because
Unless you have some AI bros funding you to the tunes of tens of millions. Like Alex Borres just lost a
but
congressional
that
primary in New York because of the flood of money that the
but
AI
again, I
bros
mean,
put
and
in.
that's what I'm saying is that individual little races they can influence with
Yeah.
money, but in terms of getting actual votes, in terms of actual grassroots enthusiasm, it's against them. It's against the data centers because anybody who knows anything about them, anybody who's ever lived next to one, hates them,
Yeah.
right? So now you're in a situation where a deeply unpopular political establishment, a deeply unpopular infrastructure policy, and deeply unpopular CEOs and tech companies that are trying to put this forward. At the same time, there is a competing technology that is being popularized in other parts of the world coming from China. Seems to me like they are betting on the wrong horse.
Yes, and here's a weird one. Alex Karp, one of the co-founders of Palantir, has suddenly become a real critic of the OpenAI Anthropic model of AI, which is funny since Palantir stock has benefited from it so much. But Alex Karp is saying, hey, what you want is to have a closed AI system. You want to own your own GPUs. You want to have maybe an open source model, but you want it in a closed loop that's air gapped off the internet. And the last thing you want to do, if you have a business that's actually got a great idea, if you're working with Claude or ChatGPT, they literally know all your business secrets as soon as you type them in. And Anthropic just got busted yesterday for essentially, they've done this serial times. They've had companies that were promising that were using Anthropic's tools, and suddenly Anthropic is in that same line of business. And it's like, how Zuckerberg at least had to buy Instagram and WhatsApp? These guys just steal their shit, right? And then did you see the face hugging thing with OpenAI the other day where OpenAI's agents apparently got loose and hacked this company in some horrifying new way? Like, these are out of control companies that even Alex Karp, who's one of the architects of the genocide in Gaza, the bombing of the schoolgirls in Iran, and the war in Ukraine, is suddenly the good guy calling for restraint here. Like, that's always a red flag to me. When you start to see rats jumping off the ship and they've got their life raft and a little megaphone and they're saying, get off the big bad ship that I used to be on and get over here on my life raft. Like, that's always a bad tell, right? That's like when Martin Bormann allegedly fled to Argentina at the end of the Nazi regime. Like, when Alex Karp is off the train, the thing is derailing. And that, to me, what I see with Oracle and the Ellison media empire, including Larry's piece of TikTok, is that they've gotten extremely ambitious. They've got extremely suspicious political motivations involving both alliances with Trump and a loyalty to Israel above all else. They've got suspect business models, because one thing we haven't even mentioned is, Nikkei reported the other day that all these hyperscalers have massively more debt than they've been reporting. And a lot of that is because these GPUs depreciate radically as soon as you install them. So they're sitting on warehouses full of assets they can't put to work. If they put them to work, then they have to take this huge write-off. It's like buying, a Solantra sports car. The minute you drive that thing off the parking lot, it's worth 10, 15% or whatever the number is. But new cars devalue as soon as you drive them off the parking lot. GPUs, if you bought them if you ordered them 18 months ago, they arrived 6 months ago, NVIDIA is going to have a new, better GPU by the time you get that thing installed. So this isn't even like broadband. Broadband, now I've forgotten the name of the company you mentioned that starts with an L again, but they built real wires. WorldCom built real wires, real fiber optic cables that did help wire, the US for broadband in the 2000s, long after the companies that built them had either gone under or just not grown. This shit isn't even going to be that. It's going to be a bunch of outdated GPUs that were designed to do generative AI, which has not proven profitable ever, anytime, anywhere, that is being outcompeted by Chinese models that, I mean, technically at the very highest levels are not quite caught up yet. But anybody with a brain is going to bet on China. They've got more engineers, they've got more resources, they've got better planning. They're doing it much more efficiently because they're using older chips, although their chips are getting better every day. Um, so you've got this whole business model that was essentially based on, wow, so many people are going to enjoy talking to a chatbot about their personal lives, or maybe discovering that they personally are Jesus. And this has literally happened. There's a thing called AI psychosis where people get into this sycophantic, particularly ChatGPT 4, will drive you crazy. And then you've got somebody like Masayoshi Son at SoftBank, one of the biggest investors in OpenAI, who admits or brags or claims that he's on ChatGPT up to 4 hours a day. Do you think that's good for his mental health? Do you think that guy, I mean, this is the guy who put a gazillion dollars into WeWork, right? Yeah, he made a lot of money off Alibaba, but I've made winning bets too, Like, that doesn't make me a genius. It doesn't make him a genius. And he is all in on AI, and particularly OpenAI. And if you want to laugh, check out SoftBank's last quarterly report. The slides on that were just, it if the guy's not on ketamine, he has definitely got AI psychosis, because it's crazy
All
pants.
right, Nat, we are coming to the end of our conversation. My question for you is this: where does Oracle stock go from here? I'm not asking necessarily for a stock prediction, although that's how I just framed that question. But I'm not really asking you to predict what's going to happen with the stock so much as what is the direction of all of this? It seems like one interpretation could be a slow and steady decline here, and a sort of slow and steady unraveling of an empire that was seemingly built somewhat overnight. Another way of looking at it is that this is a period of flux for them, and that they're going to whipsaw back and forth between, sustained decline for a number of weeks or months, followed by a gradual rise back up to some kind of, more or less equilibrium. Um, how do you read the future here, for Oracle, for Paramount, Skydance, for all this sort of conglomerate that they have created? And what does it mean as we move into the presidential election season?
Okay, one caveat before we start. Oracle, keep in mind, has had this very successful business for about 30 years of selling massive databases to hospitals, government agencies, yada, yada, yada. That business is not a growth business. Like, remember, we had this software as a service collapse last year because people were afraid AI was going to replace that. So they're in a legacy business that is not as solid as you might think. They also own Java and another of other assets. My my bet is
But
that
but to be fair, although it's a legacy business with not much growth, it does establish something like a floor for them. In other words,
it,
it
it
makes it less likely you would see an overall collapse because they do still produce a thing.
yes, but their rep is that they're less a software company than a law firm that sells software. What they really excel at is negotiating and renegotiating their contracts with these colleges and hospitals and other big inert legacy entities. But the thing is, watch what's happening with Windows 11, where their product finally got so enshittified that massive the use case is plummeting because the product sucks so bad that even though bureaucrats who are making the decisions don't use the products, there are so many of their employees complaining, I can't get my job done with Windows 11. You've got to change. And that's actually happening. So look for Oracle that. Also, we're in a bubble. Bubbles don't slowly, gradually ease down. Bubbles pop, whether it's the South Sea bubble, the tulip mania, the dot-com bubble, the railroad bubble, bubbles pop. Look what's happening in South Korea. Human beings are not rational. Read The Madness of Crowds, some summer vacation, and understand human psychology and crowd behavior. Although the algorithms are making a lot of these buying decisions. And if you look, that's one of the theories why oil prices won't go down, because the algos are so fucking stupid. They can't read the math and the tables, but they can read the newspaper articles. So if Scott Bessant and Trump and Axios get ceasefire or oil glut in the paper enough, the algos sell. Plus, on top of that, Besant is apparently making huge short sells on Sunday nights, et cetera, et cetera. So look for it to pop, because systems like this don't slowly, gradually. The Soviet Union was the only time in history where something big, overextended, peacefully declined. And thank God for that, right? It wasn't a nuclear war. It wasn't a bloodbath in Europe. It was just, but most bubbles pop, they explode. So to me, there might be some dead cat bounces, some up and down, some volatility like today's 7% bust. But long term, for what it's worth, and this is not investment advice. I don't give investment advice. I'm not a financial professional by any way, shape, or means. I'm not even a good investor, but I'm not long on Oracle. And my joke has been, if you're dumb enough to buy Oracle, you're dumb enough to buy it on the margin, dumbass. Get in there, borrow money, and buy, because this is a bad bet. If you look at their credit rating and their exposure, they're on a different level than the other hyperscalers. For one, they're way undercapitalized compared to Meta, Alphabet, Microsoft, and Amazon. Way undercapitalized. And as far as an AI competitor, the reason they're partnering with Gemini now is because, well, they were first partnered with OpenAI. So they're not really even a player in the LLM space. They're an attempt to be like CoreWeave on a big scale, which is basically, like Rackspace, like renting out servers. Okay, Rackspace was not a gazillion-dollar business. It's a fine business, but it's not Amazon or whatever. So they're a minor player with big exposure, and they've got this political, two toxic things, Trump and Israel. You can get away with one, but very few can get away with both. Like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, they were pro-Trump, but not pro-Israel. They might have been voted out of office, but they still have audiences. But if you're, Ezra Klein, New York Times, pro-Israel, not pro-Trump, they're going to be fine. But then the big question you raise the 2028 election is, are they even going to let the 2026 elections happen? Like, you've got people like Russell Voigt and Stephen Miller in the Trump administration. You've got Democrats enthusiastically voting more money for ICE and DHS detention facilities. And you've got the same Democrats who failed to prosecute anybody at the top hierarchy of January 6th. Like, they attempted a coup on January 6th, and we prosecute like some real estate dealer from Plano, right? We don't prosecute Ted Cruz. We don't prosecute Josh Hawley. We don't even prosecute Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, much less Trump. Like, the Democrats have proven incapable of standing up for our actual rights. If you look at the fights against ICE, Chicago, Minnesota, wherever, the Democratic establishment is more or less softly on this. The cops come out and protect ICE from the protesters is what happens, whether it's in Houston, wherever. So I'm very bearish on representative democracy and the American electorate. We're not going to vote our way out of this. We might have some more elections. I'm all for progressive candidates. I'm glad when they win. I'm glad when they just raise a ruckus, but that's not going to solve the problem. We're coming into an age of Caesars, and we got to hope that we get some Marcus Aureliuses and not some, Neros, because we've got a Nero in office right now for all intents and purposes. And he's fiddling while Rome burns. And maybe Barron is the one making all these poly market bets, shorting the oil market, but somebody in there is doing it to the tune of billions. So these are dark days, but they're also interesting. If you're a news junkie, these are gold. It's a golden age.
I think also it's important to note, though, that these things matter to people.
It's real
as much as I would ignore mainstream media, for example, things like 60 Minutes get people riled up. It gets people to vote. It gets people into voting booths. It makes people angry. Colbert, things like that, right? So what I'm saying is not, oh, we're going to vote our way out of something. What I'm saying, though, is that they may be laying the groundwork for a political change that they won't survive. Because monopolies can be busted. The tools do exist.
Yes, and they can also fall apart under their own inertia, which
that's true as well. So I think that I think that there's a lot more to say about that. And the final thing I just wanted to mention is that I think that this is something that needs to be. I mean, if I were advising anybody who is going to run for president in 2028, they should have a policy plan, a plank related to Hollywood, to control, to monopoly, to culture, right? Because these things, you could talk about tax policy all you want, but most people are not paying attention. They don't understand it. People understand what happens when they turn on their TV and what they're looking at. These are the kinds of issues that actually you can make get real traction on, and that lead people into more broader political discussion. So I actually think that this is a major issue in the upcoming
And one last
elections.
thing, it's easy to do with Paramount because their product almost always suck. TikTok is way worse than it used to be, and anybody who uses TikTok can tell you that. CBS is way worse than it used to be, and anybody who watches can tell you that. They've already lost Taylor Sheridan. He's with Paramount for a couple more years, but if you like Yellowstone and 1823 or 1923, whatever the shit is, you're gonna be getting it from somewhere besides Paramount in short order. South Park's the only thing I haven't seen taking a hit, but they haven't. South Park's way past their peak, right? This is like James Brown 1980. This is not, the king of funk. This is not South Park 2000, 1999 to 2008 or whatever. And so their products suck and people notice. And yeah, I think that's a sales pitch that somebody can make if there is going to be a champion at the national level. Like, who's that going to be? We saw what happened to Plattner. They're trying to destroy El Sayed in Michigan. They
Yeah, I
destroyed
mean,
Thomas
look, there's
Massey.
there's gonna be several who are gonna try. Certainly, you already
And I'm
see
afraid it's going to be Tucker Carlson.
Ro Khanna and AOC and others
Yeah.
are going to explore, and we'll see. But the point being, not necessarily that the right progressive has to have the right message, just that they need to understand that this is an issue. This
Yeah.
is an issue that
Absolutely.
needs to be made an election issue, because it is a
Absolutely.
Trump issue. It is a monopoly issue. It is a global economic issue, a
It's an
geopolitical
Israel
issue.
issue.
It's an Israel issue. It's all of those things. And anyway, we're out of time. Nat Wilson Turner is the nom de guerre on Substack. Follow Nat Wilson Turner. You can see his stuff also over at Naked Capitalism. Follow the MMA Draw on Substack as well for all of your combat sports reporting needs. Nat, thanks as always for coming on and chatting.
Thank you, Eric. It was a hoot. Thanks for keeping me on track to the degree that it's possible.
Listeners, viewers, as always, thank you. We'll talk again real soon.